Welcome, everybody. This is the Study Abroad for Undocumented Students. This is part of our GLOW Week. To get started, we want to do our land acknowledgement. The International Education Office at UCLA acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. So we want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us and for checking out our webinar for undocumented students. My name is Jacqueline Tafoya, and I work here at the Study Abroad office. Today, I will be leading the Study Abroad for Undocumented Students webinar. I do use pronouns she, her, and I am the intake advisor for UCLA Study Abroad office, more formally known as the International Education Office, the one-stop shop for undergraduate study abroad opportunities. Today's webinar is part of our Global Learning Opportunities Week, GLOW series, taking place this week. We are hosting a series of info sessions on various topics, from major specific sessions to scholarships and identity-based sessions like this one. I'll share more about GLOW towards the end of this presentation. For now, I want to pass it off to my colleague and co-facilitator for the session to introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. It's such a pleasure to virtually be here with you all today. My name is Daisy Perez, and I'm the Undocumented Student Program paralegal at UCLA and the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center. Under attorney supervision, I work to support the immigration-related needs of undocumented students at UCLA. That includes providing free and direct immigration legal services to enrolled students, as well as their immediate family members, that being parents, siblings, spouses, and children. If you have any immigration-related concerns during your time at UCLA, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Great, so thank you so much, Daisy. So to get started, here is a brief agenda of what we will be covering today. We have already introduced ourselves, but next we will be discussing why we are doing this session and its importance. We will also give some brief history of DACA from 2014 to today in the context of UCLA. We will be giving more information about advanced parole and travel considerations students should be aware of. I will touch upon our program opportunities, but it won't be our focus for the session. Should you want more information about our programs after, I welcome you to check out our other sessions that delve into them. I will also discuss funding in the context of DACA and study abroad, and then we will showcase what the timeline looks like for students to apply. Lastly, I want to share some resources for all of you, and we will then conclude with our Q&A. So why this session? And what are our objectives? Well, study abroad has seemed to be available once again for our students. In this case, we want to make sure our students understand the process and the impact of traveling outside the US. Of course, if you are thinking about studying abroad, we want to make sure that you have all the proper information you need, as well as the resources and support to go through this process. I do want to share that at UCLA Study Abroad office, we are here to help you, as well as the Undocumented Student Program. I personally come from a mixed status family and know it's not easy to think of the risks or the what ifs that can occur, but we want to offer our support and be there to guide you should you want to apply and consider studying abroad. So to give a little background about our office and our partners on campus, pre-2017, and more specifically between summer 2015 and fall 2016, there was a period of time where we were able to send students abroad. At the time, there was a process that allowed students to re-enter, quote unquote, legally. And so essentially all students needed at the time to apply for studying abroad was their DACA, and then to apply and receive their advanced parole. There were other components that students had to consider, but this was, I want to say, the base for students to go abroad. The way I am describing this sounds pretty straightforward. And again, at the time, it was more so. Regardless, it was a tough time for students nonetheless, as it still had the possibility and of there being risks. And there were also stressors that came alongside, as there was not a 100% guarantee that everything would work out fine and that the student would return. Thankfully, with our students' bravery, they were all able to come back and everything worked out fine. So all the students who were abroad that we knew of had a successful return. Ultimately, this success was in partnership with the Undocumented Student Program and our partners at Student Legal Services, and of course, the will of our students who took going abroad, took the opportunity to go abroad, not knowing the ifs, but having that support, and ultimately they were able to experience that study abroad. So unfortunately, in 2017, there was a new administration that came along. And at this time, we had to change the way we were working with students, and to a degree, discourage students from going abroad and have them really consider this due to the uncertainty. You know, one day we would hear that there was support for DACA from this administration, and then suddenly we were witnessing DACA being rescinded. And so soon the stance for DACA was clear, and with the time, the advanced parole process, which allows students to study abroad, they stopped receiving and processing applications. So in a sense, it all stopped, and students were no longer able to look into this opportunity of being able to go abroad. Today, we find ourselves, I would say, generally with a more supportive administration. Advanced parole applications are open once again, but now there's also a new consideration of decision currently being weighed in federal court, which Daisy will go more into detail. But because of this, there is still some uncertainty of what could happen, not only with advanced parole, but also DACA as a whole. All this information that I have shared has been a non-legal and oversimplified summary of what's been going on with DACA in the context of study abroad. But now I'm going to pass it off to Daisy, who will dive deeper into the actual workings and nuances of the current state of some of these topics, like advanced parole and the risks, and current travel policies impacting the undocumented community, as well as the standing of DACA.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Before I start, I do want to get a few disclaimers out of the way. Firstly, this presentation is for informational purposes only and doesn't constitute legal advice. Each individual's case and circumstances is unique, and as a result, the specific process or considerations in a case may be different from what we discussed today. I also want to reiterate that I'm a paralegal. I'm not an attorney, and therefore I personally cannot give legal advice. So if you do need case-specific legal advising, please do consult with a qualified immigration attorney. And lastly, the information in this presentation is subject to change. While it is current as of today's date, because of the ever-changing nature of immigration law, and particularly as it relates to DACA, that may not be the case a year from now, or even a few months from now. So I encourage you to follow the center or other trusted resources for updates. But in the meantime, we can go in and answer the question of what is advanced parole. Next slide, please. So advanced parole is permission granted by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security that allows certain non-citizens who are in the U.S. to temporarily travel outside of the U.S. and return lawfully. Now, the focus of this presentation is DACA-based advanced parole for study abroad purposes. But I want to let folks know that advanced parole is also available to other categories of immigrants, such as temporary protected status recipients, UNT visa recipients, and adjustment of status applicants, among others, and requirements will differ among those categories. Within the context of DACA specifically, advanced parole is available for 3 reasons only: educational, humanitarian, and employment. Since we're partnering with the International Education Office, our focus today is only on DACA advanced parole for educational study abroad purposes. However, if you believe you may have another qualifying reason to travel with DACA advanced parole, our office would be happy to discuss that further with you in an individual appointment. Now, I'll probably repeat this several times during the presentation, but it is very important for folks to obtain qualified legal advice before deciding to apply for advanced parole and travel abroad. Later in the presentation, as Jacqueline mentioned, I'll be going over some general risks that are associated with traveling abroad as a non-citizen, as well as considerations to keep in mind when making the decision to travel. But it's always best for folks to get an individual assessment of their case and understand any other specific risks that may apply to them. Next slide, please. You're likely aware DACA has faced many legal challenges over the last few years. And I can't really go over every piece of litigation, but I want to make sure that I address some of the more recent updates that have taken place and updates that affect how DACA is currently implemented. So notably on July 16, 2021, U.S. District Court Judge Hannon ruled that DACA is unlawful and halted the processing of new DACA initial applications, which folks may recall had only recently begun to be accepted again, along with advanced parole requests in December 2020. However, the judge did allow for DACA to continue for current recipients while that decision was being appealed. More recently, on August 24, 2022, after initiating and completing a formal rulemaking process for DACA, under direction of the Biden administration, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security announced a final rule to, quote, preserve and fortify the DACA program. Among other things, the final rule maintained the current threshold eligibility criteria to apply for DACA and also retained the existing process for DACA requesters to obtain work authorization. This final rule, which is scheduled to go into effect on October 31st, is thought to be a way to address some of the litigation around DACA. On October 5th, 2022, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision on the Texas versus USA case, ultimately agreeing with Judge Hannon that DACA is unlawful. However, despite that finding, the court ruled that individuals that already have DACA can continue to renew for the time being. The court also acknowledged the updated DACA regulations, the final rule, and decided to send the case back to the lower district court to review whether that new DACA rule is lawful. And then as of last week, Judge Hannon ruled that DACA can continue, at least temporarily, with the same limitations he previously set in place, while attorneys prepare additional legal arguments related to the new DACA rule. He has not set a timeline for future hearings, so at this time, we don't know when another decision may come. So in summary, despite all this recent movement and action in the courts regarding DACA, right now where we are at as far as who can apply is the same as where we were after the July 16, 2021 decision. So sadly, USCIS is unable to adjudicate, or in other words, grant or deny or take any action on new or pending initial DACA requests, although they do continue to accept them. So if you think you may be eligible, I'd encourage you to consult with an attorney to go through the process of applying. DACA renewals are currently being accepted, processed, and approved. And similarly, advanced parole applications for DACA recipients with qualifying reasons for travel also continue to be accepted, processed, and approved. Next slide, please. Okay, so we went over what advanced parole is, right? Who can apply, qualifying reasons for DACA recipients in particular to apply, and the current state of DACA. So based on all that, we might say that yes, technically and generally speaking, DACA recipients are currently able to apply for advanced parole for an educational purpose such as study abroad. However, I want to highlight again that before making a decision to travel abroad or even just apply for advanced parole, it is incredibly important to seek qualified legal advice. There are many risk factors and considerations to keep in mind before making the individual decision to travel. Next slide, please. And that is especially true if you have any of the following special circumstances. If you've ever had a prior order of deportation or removal, for example, if you've ever had a case in immigration court or been in front of an immigration judge in the past, even if you were a child at the time, or maybe your parents or an attorney appeared in your place. If you have any criminal convictions, even if they have not affected your eligibility for DACA, prior criminal history is important to disclose and discuss with an attorney as it may affect your ability to re-enter the US. Similarly, if you have multiple entries into the US without inspection, so without a valid visa or parole, and also if you have ever engaged in or been accused of immigration-related fraud or misrepresentation to the government. And that can include even minor things like mistakes on previous DACA applications. All these things are very much worth discussing with an attorney to assess any possible additional risk level that may apply to you. Next slide. All right, so Above that, I think it's also important to understand that applying for advanced parole, having your request approved, and then having a valid advanced parole travel document issued does not guarantee your ability to re-enter the US. Essentially, only US citizens have the right to re-enter the US. Non-citizens, including lawful permanent residents or green card holders, and other immigrants and non-immigrants with valid visas are subject to inspection by Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and can be denied entry. So in making a decision to travel, definitely consider your own individual risk tolerance and discuss with your loved ones if that's the right decision for you. And ultimately, if you make the decision to travel on advanced parole, please also be aware that if a border official finds you to be inadmissible under immigration law, whether that's due to prior immigration history, criminal convictions, or other factors, they can deny you entry. A border officer can also deny entry based on their own discretion. There's also potentially the risk that your advanced parole and underlying DACA status can be revoked while you are outside of the US, and that then affects your ability to return. And relatedly, given the ongoing DACA litigation, we do believe there may be some additional risks to traveling with advanced parole, since if you happen to be outside the US on advanced parole, when a court decision comes out that changes the landscape of DACA, your DACA status may be affected, and that can affect your ability to return. So again, given the general considerations and risks discussed here, I just want to once again reiterate how crucial it is to consult with an immigration attorney if you're considering advanced parole, so that you can flesh out the level of risk in your particular case. Next slide.
Thank you, Daisy. So given the current state of DACA and the risks involved, it's difficult for the Study Abroad Office to outright encourage our undocumented community to apply for advanced parole and sign up for Study Abroad program. But again, this is a personal choice that ultimately you as individuals must make in consultation with an immigration attorney to assess your specific situation. So if after everything we've shared so far, you are still interested in making Study Abroad happen for you, more power to you. And of course, we encourage you to check out our Study Abroad 101 session that was part of this week's GLOW week. And so these sessions can be found in our on-demand section of our GLOW website at ieo.ucla.edu/GLOW. On that site, you can also explore a number of other sessions that dive deeper into the Study Abroad programs that we offer. What follows is a very brief overview of the Study Abroad opportunities that we offer. I'm going to be giving you sort of like a Study Abroad mini 101 session. I'll also provide some advanced parole and DACA specific context for our mini 101 session, which again it's not covering all of the 101 session, but this is just brief information in case you are thinking about going forward with this. So UCLA students can experience a spectrum of study abroad opportunities. There's no one type of study abroad anymore, and there is no one set time to study abroad for everyone. Everyone is on their own path here, but regardless, we are happy to share our top 3 types of study abroad opportunities. The first program that I want to share is the traditional university immersion programs. These programs, it's where students attend a school like University College London in the UK or Yonsei University in South Korea. They take whichever courses they want with local professors and local students at that institution. A mechanical engineer student, for example, can take 2 engineering courses toward their major and 2 courses towards their GE requirements. We also have our UCLA faculty-led programs, which students can go on a 3 to 6 long summer program with a UCLA professor and take 2 to 3 classes in a more experiential learning environment that anything a lecturer at UCLA can offer. These are open to all majors, even if it is not designed for specific majors. I would say all majors are welcome to apply to our UCLA faculty-led. Some study abroad programs also offer an internship or research abroad opportunity. These are also new models of study abroad. Now we have opportunities where students can intern for academic credit and make progress towards a degree. There are also options where students only intern at a startup in Berlin, for example, business in Shanghai. There are others where they are able to conduct field work and take an ecology class in Costa Rica, for example. These are not the only programs, however, as we also offer a dozen others, from programs that are language focused, international summer schools, programs with UC students only at one of our centers abroad. These are just some of the options among others that our office offers our students. As far as financial aid and study abroad, the main question we get is, can I use my financial aid for a study abroad program? The answer is yes. As long as you continue to be eligible, yes, you can receive financial aid to cover some of the program costs. Now, the second question we get is, are there scholarships available? The answer is also yes. But keep in mind that scholarships generally don't cover the full amount of the program, but rather chip away at the cost. So what does financial aid mean in the context of students who have DACA? For UCLA financial aid, DACA students can carry over most of their UCLA scholarships and grants for a study abroad program. I will share that there are some exceptions, most notably for summer programs, which also apply to someone who is a US citizen. It's just to give some clarification, during summer, there is less aid, and so students are most likely going to see less grant aid. And if you don't recall, grant aid, what I mean by that is free money. For student loan eligibility, there is the California Dream Loan Program that provides AB 540 students the ability to take out a loan. Now, I know loans are not ideal, but they could potentially be an option for you. Typically, the loan is capped at $4,000 a year per eligible student at UCLA, with a maximum of $20,000 as an undergraduate student. I do want to mention that this information we have confirmed with the financial aid office. We aren't just sharing information without confirming from our main source. I want to share that if you have further questions about your loan eligibility, we recommend you consult with the financial aid advisors. Their office is also located here in Murphy Hall. Their office is Murphy Hall A129. For scholarships, there are UCAP scholarships that are available to students, and they're open to all UCLA students. I know I didn't get into specifics of what UCAP is. Our Study Abroad 101 session does, so feel free to check that out. But UCAP essentially is one of the types of programs that we offer. Our office also has scholarships that we give out to students. And I want to say that most, except one, explicitly says students must be a permanent resident. But if you see that status is not explicitly mentioned, you are more than welcome to apply to the scholarship. There are also external scholarships that students can apply to. And again, apply to as many scholarships as you can. The more you are able to receive, the less you would have to pay out of pocket. Within our website, we do have a section for scholarships. You can browse the list and see when applications are due, as well as what the eligibility requirements are. For scholarships, again, you can visit our website for more information. It is ieo.ucla.edu/scholarships. Within the slide, I also just want to briefly mention that we do have a list of least expensive programs by term. Within that list, you can see in the summer what programs are more affordable. Same thing for the academic year. We can show you a list of what is more affordable during fall, for example, or what's more affordable during spring. We definitely encourage you to think outside of Europe. Europe is a very popular destination, and so it is going to be just as costly. If you're interested in seeing this list, feel free to email us and we can get that to you. Our email is info@ieo.ucla.edu. I will also have our information at the end of the presentation, so feel free to stick around then. So now I want to give you a brief breakdown of what a financial aid can potentially look like and what a study abroad program can cost. I want to share that regardless of status, we do tend to see students going abroad and studying in Europe, which I just mentioned. Again, keep in mind that Europe is expensive, and it is also the traditional popular destination for students. So one of the things we advocate for is to try and make it more affordable for students, is by sharing the fact that Europe is, again, a popular destination. And so just to give you more context, it might be cheaper to go to Europe during the academic year rather than summer, because again, the financial aid office just has less aid to give out. We also invite you to look at other countries like Latin America, Africa, or Southeast Asia. Those continents do tend to be more cheaper than Europe. And again, they offer the same opportunities to go abroad and network, as well as expand your knowledge of other cultures and whatnot. I will share, my family is from Mexico, and I did study abroad in Mexico as well. For me, it was definitely cheaper than the original European countries I was considering. Now, I'm not saying don't even consider or go to Europe. I am solely sharing my own experience with my own financial aid and the program costs. And, although my family is from Mexico, I was still able to immerse myself in my own cultura and experience Independence Day, as well as Dia de los Muertos during my time there, while also taking the opportunity to visit my family while I was there. Going off of that, let's get started with our first example. So brief disclaimer, this is solely an example of what you could potentially be seeing. Now, you can see here that even though there is an EFC of 0, that doesn't mean that this is exactly what you would get, as everyone's financial aid situation is very different from one another. All of the following examples are just to give you an idea of what you could potentially expect in regards to funding and costs. Now, again, this session is for our undocumented students, and so all of these examples have been catered to give you just an idea. The first example we are working on here with is looking into this summer in Sussex program in the UK and taking 12 units. Now, to be honest, as an advisor, me seeing the program costs, I can already tell you that for summer, this is a high cost program. Typically, some of the cheaper summer options start at $6,000, but again, this is Europe, and so it is a more costly program. This is what a student can potentially receive who has an EFC of 0. The student would be getting a university grant, as you can see here, of $4,000, a Dream Pell Grant of $2,165, a matching grant of $1,000, and the California Dream Loan of $1,000. So financial aid is potentially covering a little over $8,000, with the student having to pay about $1,000, almost $1,500, I would say, out of pocket. Now, something I did not mention is that the cost includes tuition for Sussex, your housing and meals, your books, and the cost of your plane ticket. The only thing not factored are any souvenirs you want to bring back, or the costs that you can potentially have if you want to travel around the UK, go to London or Manchester, for example. Now, going back to the unmet need that financial aid is not covering, which is the $1,483, if the student applies for scholarships, then they could use that money to help pay for that $1,483 that they need. If the student receives multiple scholarships, right, then they can potentially also use it to chip away at taking out the loan. So if, for example, the student receives 2 scholarships that are worth $1,000 each, then they wouldn't need to potentially take out that loan as well. Again, this is solely an example. So something too that I just want to mention in the context, right, of today's session is that the program cost does not include the fees to apply for advanced parole. So that is also something you might want to consider when looking at the cost of studying abroad. Now let's compare that student with another who is attending a program in Italy. You can see here that the unmet need is much higher. The student needs $4,000. This is because the student, if you notice at the top, is taking less units and is not triggering the maximum amount of financial aid they can get. In order to maximize your aid, you want to make sure you hit the 12 units. Otherwise, you can find yourself with the situation of having to pay more out of pocket. For any programs during the academic year, you always have to hit the magic number, which is 12 units. So this information here is solely for students who are interested in a summer program. I will share that some programs don't even allow students to go above 8 units. So you definitely want to consider that. And if you have questions, our office is here to help guide you with your program options. Now, the main point I want to make here is just because you see a price on the program being lesser, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be in regards to your financial aid. Again, the previous program was about the same cost, but in terms of financial aid, the other program in this particular case would be better for the student as it allows the student to hit the 12 units. I'm sorry, the previous program would be best because it allows the student to hit the 12 units, whereas this one here is only 8 and it's not triggering the maximum amount of financial aid they could potentially be getting. Now, looking at a program during the fall, you can already see that the cost is higher. Please keep in mind that you would be overlapping this with what you would pay at UCLA. So for our programs during the academic year, rather than paying UCLA tuition and fees and your housing, you would be paying the program cost, not your UCLA, nothing towards your brew and bill. So going off from this example, you can see that the cost of this program in South Korea is around $17,600. The student has an EFC of 1,185. So that means that the financial aid that the student needs would be around $16,445. Now, looking at the aid that the student received, you're looking and seeing here that the student has gotten around $14,000 in financial aid with an unmet need of $3,436. In comparison, here's another example, this time in Sweden. You can see that the program cost is $14,000. The student has an EFC of 0. And so here is an example of how the financial aid office has prepared their financial aid package. Now, I'm so sorry, going back into Seoul, South Korea, as mentioned, I did say that Europe is a bit more expensive, but unfortunately we are seeing that Asia, South Korea, and China and Japan are also just as expensive. If you remember, I did give you some examples of cheaper continents, and Asia was not part of it. And so you will see, and again, it does depend on the program and the length, you will see a fluctuation of financial aid. Again, if you have any questions about financial aid, definitely reach out to them. Their office would be the best to help you see what you could potentially be looking at. So I know I didn't go into specifics about our programs, but just to give you some brief information about fees, whenever you come across our UCAP programs, if you're just browsing through our website, just know that there are no application fees. You can apply without any financial obligation, which is great. You can apply without any obligations with finances for summer and fall of 2023. The withdrawal deadline for dropping out without fees is going to be April 1st or May 1st, depending on the program. Before you submit, there is a terms and conditions page that I highly recommend you read over. That is where you would find your withdrawal deadline. Some programs do have other withdrawal fees. Whenever you talk to an advisor here at our office, definitely ask them if the program you are inquiring about has any additional fees. Losing your housing deposit is an example of what you could potentially lose when withdrawing after the specific deadline. As for the out-of-pocket expenses before getting their financial aid, I would say that all students need to purchase their plane ticket on their own. Financial aid, unfortunately, is not dispersed until a couple days before. And of course, you don't want to buy your plane ticket before, just days before, because it's most likely going to be more expensive. For some programs, as mentioned, students must also give a housing deposit before they depart. That's also something you might want to consider when you're talking to an advisor and just asking what you should potentially be saving for. I will share that for my program, I just had to pay for my plane ticket in advance. And then once I got to Mexico, I had already gotten my financial aid dispersed, and that was when I gave my housing deposit. Again, some programs will require you to give it before you even get your financial aid, before you depart. So definitely ask the study abroad advisor or send us an email with the program you're interested in, and we can definitely get that information to you. As for UCLA Travel Study and the UCLA Global Internship Program, there is a $300 non-refundable deposit that students have to make. And so after April 1st, all students are responsible for the program fees. If you are concerned about this deposit, I would definitely encourage you to email the advisor for the program, or you can just email us and we can direct you and connect you with the advisor. If you feel comfortable in sharing your status and the fact that you are going through advanced parole, which is already an added expense, I would say go ahead and ask if there's some leeway that can be done with you giving this deposit later. Typically, our office does try to accommodate our students in giving the deposit later for this specific reason. Of course, I'm not promising that they will, but I do encourage you to try and advocate for yourself. Definitely reach out to us. And again, we do encourage you to let us know if you are applying to advanced parole, because obviously that is an added expense. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting you as best as we can. In terms of when to apply, we recommend starting as soon as the applications open. And so typically you will find that for any of our UCP programs, the application opens about 9 months before the program starts. So you do have to apply quite in advance. Typically, students are always worried about the programs being competitive. For the most part, they are not. They are first come, first serve. And so I would say the only competitiveness is how quick you can hit that submit button. I will say that most of our UCP programs, you do have to meet eligibility requirements such as class level and GPA. Some do require you to take certain prereqs abroad, but it will depend on the program. I would say that most of our programs do not require anything, any prereqs. It would just be the GPA and the class level. And then we have a question here. Can I apply and register now? The answer is yes. So for most of our programs, they are open now. They actually opened on October 4th. We do have some that are limited capacity, so we're only allowed to send out a certain amount of students. Those will be opening on November 1st, and you can check out whether it's limited or not on our website. So as of today, what would your checklist look like? We recommend to schedule an appointment as soon as possible with an attorney. And so consulting with an attorney that you confide in, it could be Daisy, it can be any other attorney that you know. You definitely want to have your passport renewed or apply to it. And then additionally, we would recommend that you message the financial aid office via message center, send them the program you're interested in, and ask them about a sample eFAN so you can get a rough idea of what it would look like financially for you. When applying to our programs, we highly suggest you notify us at the Study Abroad office. We do not have any mechanism to know whether a student is DACA and applying to our program unless you notify us directly. And the reason I share this is because we are able to process your application faster and get you that acceptance letter ahead of time for your advanced parole application. So we also wouldn't be able to offer support if you do not self-disclose. I do want to remind all of you that we are here to support you in every way we can. And so please come and talk to us so that we can guide you as best as we can, provide you with that acceptance letter as soon as you apply, and get you going. Additionally, within the application, we do want to give you the suggestion of applying to advanced parole as early as 6 months, as they do take quite some time to process applications. So just to give you more information, if you apply to study abroad for the summer 2023, you should have started your advanced parole as early as November or even now. For fall 2023 programs, most of them do start in August or early September. So you need to make sure that you are submitting your advanced parole preferably before January. So again, I would say that your number one step from this session is to schedule a legal consult with an attorney. That way, you can find out whether you would even have the option of applying to advanced parole and possibly going to study abroad. Now, I'm going to pass it over back to Daisy to speak more on the logistics of actually applying to advanced parole and what that looks like.
Thank you again, Declan. So in order to apply for advanced parole, you would want to prepare and file the following checklist items. So there's Form I-131, application for travel document. That's relatively short and simple, honestly, compared to other USCIS forms. You do need to provide payment for the USCIS filing fee, which, as Jacqueline mentioned, is an additional cost to studying abroad if you are a DACA recipient. So that's $575 for an advanced parole request, and that can be paid to USCIS by money order, check, or credit card. In addition, you'll need to provide a declaration or a statement of purpose explaining your need to travel with advanced parole. So in this context, if you're applying for advanced parole for study abroad purposes, you would use the declaration to delve into the educational aspect. So for example, why did you select that particular program? Will you be taking courses that count towards your degree requirements? And why is it important that you travel for this opportunity? So it sounds like a lot, but we do have samples and templates available that we can share that can serve as a guide for how to structure your statement. You'll also need evidence of the reason you're traveling. So that's where what Jacqueline just mentioned is why it's critical that you connect with their office as soon as possible. One, to identify, the program that you want to apply to, and also begin the application process so that they can issue you that letter, that acceptance letter that we'll need to include with the advanced parole request. And then lastly, you'll need to provide a copy of your current DACA approval notice, a copy of your current work permit if available, and if not, a copy of another government issued ID would be okay. It's not on the slide, but Jacqueline did mention you should have a valid unexpired passport, and you'll actually need to include a copy of that passport with your application, as well as 2 original passport size photos of you taken within 30 days of when you will submit your application. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier, but on the Form I-131, that's actually where you will indicate to USCIS the travel dates that you are requesting, the reason for your travel, and also what country or countries you request permission to travel to. As far as the travel dates that you request, we generally recommend to give yourself a buffer from the actual study abroad program date. So ideally, at least a week, if not more, before and after your expected start and end date, respectively. It's absolutely critical to return to the US within the date range that you were approved for. So allowing yourself a buffer would be helpful in case your travel plans suddenly change or there's some sort of emergency that requires you to stay slightly longer than you anticipated. As far as the length of travel that you can request, there are no specific limits that we're aware of, but in the past, our campus attorney did recommend not being outside the US for more than 180 days if you are a non-citizen. Next slide, please. All right, so after you apply, anecdotally from cases that we've recently filed at the center and from what we hear from other practitioners, the processing time for a non-emergency advanced parole request is currently between 3 to 6 months. So this means that after you submit your application, it can potentially take up to 6 months before USCIS issues an approval. This is why timing when you apply for your preferred study abroad program is also critical. It is very important to wait to receive approval of your advanced parole request before you travel, since you will need to show your approved travel document to CBP at the airport or land border when you're returning. So on the slide, you'll see there's a redacted example of the I-512L, which is the approved advanced parole travel document with just some information that's redacted. please make sure that you travel only within the date specified on the approved I-512L and only to the country or countries indicated. If you intend or wish to travel to additional countries while you are abroad, you will need to request for that in advance on your application, and you'll need to have a valid educational purpose that can be supported with evidence for why you are requesting to travel to those additional countries. Now, in most cases, travelers returning with advanced parole are subject to something that's called secondary inspection, which is with a senior CBP officer who will ask a lot of questions verifying your travel dates, where you travel to, etc. And that can be very stressful. And to be honest, your experience will likely vary depending on the officer. We've heard from some students say that the officer they met with was nice and friendly, while other students say they met with someone who was a bit more aggressive with the questioning and created like an uncomfortable environment. Just be aware of that, and again, be prepared to answer questions about your travel when you are returning. Next slide, please. Okay, now on this page here, Jacqueline has listed a few links to resources that are available to undocumented students that are enrolled at a UC. As I mentioned, our center provides free and direct immigration legal services to students and their immediate family members. And the center does serve most UC campuses, with the exception of Berkeley, since they have an existing partnership with an external organization. The link you see on the screen will take you to the center's website, and specifically a page that lists campus-specific resources. We also have, of course, UCLA's USP website listed here. And beyond legal services, USP provides holistic support to UndocuBruins with information and guidance related to academics and funding, research opportunities, for example. USP also hosts several events for undocumented students throughout the year that I encourage you to attend if you can. And then lastly, we have a final bullet point here highlighting CAPS, or counseling services at UCLA. We added that here because we think it's important to recognize that DACA is not just an immigration policy, although I know we sometimes discuss it in a very dry and matter-of-fact manner. There are hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients across the country whose lives are affected by the program and who, along with friends and family members and loved ones, have to endure near constant uncertainty due to ongoing litigation that targets DACA. So please prioritize taking care of yourself and seek support when you need it. UCLA students have access to many on-campus services, including mental health support via CAPS. And I'm sure I or Jacqueline would be happy to connect you if you're unsure how to reach out.
Yeah, so thank you, Daisy, for mentioning all those resources. In addition to everything that we've mentioned, that has all been to study abroad, which again would be outside of the United States. I do want to share some alternative study away opportunities. So not necessarily abroad, but away from UCLA, away from California, but still within the United States. Although all these do not require advanced parole because you are not leaving the country, there are still other factors that you should consider. And I will talk about those in the next slide. But just to give you some alternatives, our office has one program within the United States, and it is within our UCLA travel study, which is the faculty-led programs. The one offered is in New York and has sociology courses available. You might have also heard about the UCDC program as well that takes place in the capital. Now, I am sharing all these other programs, UCCS, UCDC, UCNRS, which is the UC Natural Reserve System. But please be advised that I am only giving them a plug here. If you have questions about these specific programs, please make sure to reach out to them directly, as we do not oversee any of them besides the first one, which again is our UCLA travel study program in New York. So as I mentioned, I did state that the previous programs I shared do not require advanced parole, but there are still other travel considerations for domestic flights. So you have probably heard of the Real ID that is going to be implemented on May 3rd of next year. We want to share that the following resources have great guides that further detail what you should consider when flying domestically. So Immigrants Rising has a great guide, which we will be linking on the description below. Additionally, the ACLU has these two other resources for people to know their rights when flying. Again, these resources we will make available on the description below, so feel free to check them out. And of course, if you have any other worries, we definitely recommend that you speak with an attorney and get a legal consult. So now we will be going on to our Q&A. So one question that we have is, when returning to the US, will we need all of the documents that we have previously submitted for our advanced parole? So I'll go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, that's a good question. You definitely will want to have your original, if possible, DACA approval notice, your DACA work permit, the documents that demonstrate that you are in current valid DACA status. You'll also, like, as part of the checklist I mentioned, you need your valid passport. You'll definitely need that. But you won't need to bring like a copy of the form I-131. Like, that's not something that you need to bring when you're traveling. You don't need to bring like proof that you paid for the form I-131 or anything like that. So it's really just going to be the last few supporting documents, again, approval notice, work permit, valid unexpired passport that you'll need to have when returning.
Another question, if their DACA work permit is expiring soon, and they're currently renew it, can they still apply for advanced parole, or do you suggest that they wait?
You can do both. You can concurrently file your DACA renewal request at the same time that you are applying for advanced parole. Yeah, you don't necessarily need to wait.
And then another is, can you give us some tips of what we can expect when returning? You did touch upon it a bit, but can you just remind students the potential not necessarily risk, but maybe what to have in hand and what they can expect when returning, or if they have layovers, for example, right, and they're going through different airports, maybe they're stopping by in Canada first and getting a separate flight. What can they expect? What should they be aware of? And again, what should they have on hand?
Yeah, to be honest, so for the first part of the question, like what you should prepare, what to expect when returning. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Daisy, sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty much, the only thing I could say would be like the general things that I already mentioned in the presentation. Things like, expect to be questioned pretty extensively about the reason for your travel, about where you travel to, and just expect to be in secondary inspection. What I would recommend if you are traveling abroad with advanced parole and you've worked with an attorney, which again, you definitely should work with an attorney, is to set an appointment with the attorney before you travel, so that they can directly advise you on your particular case, what you might expect. For example, if you have prior criminal history that maybe doesn't affect your ability to travel with advanced parole, but you might get questioned about, the attorney can kind of guide you as far as how to answer, how not to overshare. So this is another one of those cases where it's best to talk about it with an attorney as far as how to prepare. I know for cases that we do at the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center, the attorneys always have those appointments before someone travels abroad. They'll have the appointment maybe about a couple of weeks before they leave, and they'll get a copy of the itinerary so that they can keep track of like the students when they're returning, make sure to have their phone available in case the student needs to reach out like at any point during the process of returning. So that's probably my main recommendation there. And Jacqueline, you did mention something that I don't think I went over, which is like, what if I have a layover in another country? That I imagine in this example, maybe the student wasn't approved to travel to Canada, but maybe that's the only flight they were able to book. It is best practice, if at all possible, to book a direct flight to the country you're approved to travel to, or if you are approved to travel to multiple countries, to book your travel, like, to one of those countries with a layover in one of those countries. We don't know how USCIS how CBP might interpret a layover. That's not something that I'm too familiar with. I've just heard that it's best practice to not have a layover when possible. And if you do happen to, there's just no other flights and you need to, make a stop in Canada, for example, don't leave the airport. Just go from, one of your flights to the next. Just try to be in the space for as little time as possible, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Daisy. And just to give further tip, we had current students who did apply for advanced parole and who had gone abroad, and they successfully returned. I do want to share that one student mentioned that they also booked their flights when the attorney's office was open. That way, in case that they had any issues or stressors, they had their attorney's number on hand and they were able to dial in case. So that's something too that you might want to consider if you are thinking about studying abroad, and when looking into your flights. Definitely what Daisy just mentioned, we recommend you speaking with your attorney. A lot of the attorneys will ask you for the itinerary anyway, so that they know when you're coming back and expect to, in case you have to call them, they're ready to go and they're able to assist you. Thank you so much, Daisy. And here is your information if you want to share how they can schedule an appointment with you.
Yeah, thank you, Declan. And that's a great tip, actually, to book when the attorney's office is open. I know our former campus attorney would honestly be available outside of work hours, but if possible, yes, do it during work hours. Okay, so if you want to talk about advanced parole, you're interested in applying, want to, assess the level of risk in your situation, maybe you found that some of those special circumstances that I mentioned do apply to you, definitely schedule a initial intake with me. Our services, like I mentioned, are free. So there's absolutely no cost to you to schedule this appointment. I do want to be transparent and let everyone know that at this time, we do not have a full-time staff attorney at UCLA since the former attorney transitioned out at the end of last month. That said, I'm still available to do the legal intake, and there is a managing attorney that's helping to oversee this transitionary period. And he's the person that, after I do the intake, since again, I'm a paralegal and not an attorney, I'm not going to give you legal advice after the appointment. After the appointment, what I'll actually do is then meet with my supervisor, review the notes with him, and he'll make an assessment, and then I'll just follow up with you about that. So again, if you are interested at all in advanced parole, reach out to schedule an appointment.
All right, and lastly, I want to share just our office contact information. We are located in Murphy 1332. If you have any questions about any of our programs and you're starting to look into it and see if there's a best fit for you, definitely reach out to us. We do offer a virtual drop-in advising. We have that available Monday, Tuesday, and Fridays from 10 to 12 p.m. and 1 to 3 p.m. If you do have a program in mind and you're just interested about knowing more about the academics or the housing, how that specific program would work, you can definitely send us an email. Again, our email is info@ieo.ucla.edu. And we can definitely schedule a one-on-one with one of our advisors and they can go more into detail. But please reach out to us. I hope that the session has been very helpful for you in considering studying abroad. Again, both offices are here to help you. We're here to support you and guide you through this process should you wish to take this opportunity. So thank you so much. I want to thank Daisy for being here today with us and giving us this information. And thank you, everybody. We hope to see you at our offices soon, talk to you about studying abroad and the potentials of possibly doing advanced parole. And thank you again. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.